but he's not feeling very good. So I'll be sitting in for him. As you're aware, the 20th of February is the World Day of Social Justice. And I just wanted to sort of quickly take you back to the resolution that was adopted by the UN General Assembly in November 2007, which basically led to the creation of this day. And the resolution that was adopted, it sort of recognized and sort of reaffirmed, among other things, the commitment to full and productive employment and decent work for all, including women and young people. And it also sort of recognized the broad-based and sustained economic growth in the context of sustainable development as a necessity to sort of sustain social development and social justice. And this kind of brings us to climate change and how it undermines social justice. So, I mean, among other, I mean, these things are very basic, but the world's poor didn't cause climate change, but the world's poor faces its worst consequences, and that includes climate-induced displacement, and it's making things more difficult for the poor to escape poverty, and it's increasing sort of competition for scarce resources. And those who are hit the hardest have the least to say in how climate change is addressed. Climate change threatens health, it threatens financial resilience, food security, young people, and women. And in the context of Bangladesh, over 7 million Bangladeshis were displaced by climate change in 2022, and it's probably going to double by 2050. And it goes without saying that these statistics are really alarming. So keeping these things in mind, we sort of aim to explore social justice implications of climate-induced displacement and talk about sustainable solutions and sort of try to understand what more inclusive policies would look like, potentially what they might look like. And to that end, we've sort of gathered an esteemed group of panelists, and we have with us today Abu Sadat Monir Khan, who's the program head of CCP at BRAC. We have Antonia Brill, who's an advisor of GIZ. We have Tamazer Ahmed, the manager of policy research and advocacy at ActionAid Bangladesh. Tasnia Khondokar Probha, who's a research associate at the Center for Peace and Justice. And finally, we have Zahid Amin Shashotto, who's the head of program at Uttoron. We have these guiding questions, which we want to ask you guys today. But we're going to start off with Moniruzzaman Bhai, and then go on to Probha, and then Tamazer Ahmed as the first set of panelists who will speak. And we're going to start off the discussion with 3 questions. We want to know how you feel about the specific challenges, that climate-induced individuals face in urban areas from a social justice standpoint, and how these challenges can be addressed. So that's what we want to start off today's discussion with. So if Moniruzzaman Bhai could sort of kick things off, it would be very, very nice. So thank you.
Thank you. This is a really challenging issue not only in Bangladesh, it's basically global issue. For example, that climate-driven migration forces being felt across many developing nations, that people are struggling with droughts, heatwave, storms, burst river on a scale never seen before. Just from the World Economic Forum, I have read one article that 40.5 million people were displaced in 2020, the highest level in 10 years, with disaster responsible for 3 times more people uprooting their lives than conflict and violence. In Bangladesh, last month, one article published from our executive director, and in his article mentioned that 2,000 people, especially the migrant, arrive every day in Bangladesh city capital, making it the world First is growing megacity. Its crumbling infrastructure cannot cope with the influx, while the lack of housing means that 40% greater Dhaka's population of 21 million lives in a slum. This data indicates that many people basically have migrated to our capital. They thought that basically they're coming for social security and economic security. But what about their place? Especially they live in a low-lying area, especially in every cities and context of Dhaka also. They're facing a problem with waterlogging. Any short duration rainfall destroy their homes, especially the slums. Heat wave, cold waves, and vector-borne diseases. These are main climatic phenomena that they are facing every day. So, social justice point of view, like for them, there is nobody who is looking after this issue. Because, you know, especially in Dhaka, 61.8 million people lived in the city. And in the slum area, there are 21 million people. So it's really, really challenging. But if we address these challenges, we need to have a dual focus, which is both on mitigating the global warming by cutting greenhouse gas emission and putting system in place to support the poor nation to adapt to climate change impact. There are a growing number of piecemeal local initiatives to improve this situation, especially for the climate migrants. I will give you an example from BRAC, what BRAC is doing. BRAC, we have a climate bridge fund, which helps non-governmental organizations implement projects to increase the resilience of people displaced by climate change, especially focused by displaced people or climate migrant, only focus those people. But more fundamental changes is needed. The global that community must focus on the issue and they have to hear the voices of the people from the countries most affected and support them to invest at scale in adaptation initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Munir Zaman Bhai. Profa, Tasnia, I know that you've been working on a project which took you to a lot of settlements recently. And, some of the things that Munir Zaman Bhai was saying, about the kind of challenges that climate displaced individuals face, heat waves, cold waves, waterlogging, et cetera, et cetera. I know that you're about to have this wonderful exhibition at the EMK Center in about, 10 days' time? Could you tell us a bit more about that? And of course, any other thing that you would like to say about this guiding question about, challenges that climate-induced individuals face?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's always, difficult to follow up after, someone like Munir Zaman Bhai. I don't have a lot to add to the context that he's said, but in terms of the project that I'm involved in, it's a photo ethnography where, you have data, but you're also sort of, as a researcher, placing yourself in these spaces that aren't that haven't been underobserved, but the perspectives of being victimized by climate change continues, and it's about raising that awareness that we've worked on climate displacement, we've had attention on these issues, but the victimhood continues, and how does it continue, and how does it affect an entire household, people across different marginalized groups. And the photo ethnography is an attempt to visualize that impact. It's an attempt to connect the attendee of the exhibition to the plight of the people who've been displaced. I think echoing what Munir Zaman Bhai has already mentioned, the solution has to be twofold. Obviously, at a global level, we have to ensure that climate policies are adopted and implemented, and that they're done with accountability. And I think for the second part of the solution, I had the opportunity to attend COP last year with Dhaka North's mayor, who has had a very strong stance on protecting the people who are displaced and who arrive in Dhaka, while also acknowledging that this problem is becoming overwhelming for the city to sort of manage. Again, every year, as Monir Zaman Bhai has already mentioned, 2,000 migrants every day, 2,000 migrants come into Dhaka city, which is a very old statistic, by the way. And again, this brings us to the fact that data on climate migrants is always, it always needs to be adapted, because the migrants themselves do not identify climate change as the reason that they've moved. So you need conversations, deep understanding of how dispossession works and how climate change sort of exacerbates that vulnerability to understand that specific data on climate migration or migrants. And in his rhetoric, the mayor has constantly stated that he doesn't want to oust people of these settlements that are, technically illegal, but again, they've become these communities where people belong, people who essentially don't have anywhere else to go. And he's begun to collaborate with NGOs and INGOs to deliver aid and support to these communities. But it's also done in pockets. You cannot, again, we don't even have the census of how many people live in these settlements, right? Many experts, claim the number 4 million or above 4 million, and then official numbers are slightly lower. So again, to come at it from a very holistic approach, much more work needs to be done, much more collaborative work needs to be done across NGOs, across INGOs, to really understand how we can build resilience. And how do we define resilience of someone who has been displaced by climate change and then finds themselves in Dhaka city and then is again at the front lines of climate change, at the hands of extreme heat, at the hands of waterlogging or urban flooding. They are the first and the worst affected. So how do we really, in how we design interventions and how we design our research, really understand the journey of a climate migrant from start to where they are now? I think this is a continuing topic, and I know that in both national and international platforms, climate displacement has found a lot of space where people have come in and sort of talked about it. And I think that's only the beginning of finding a sustainable solution.
Tasnia, I mean, I just wanted to ask you a follow-up question. When you were describing some of the people you met in the settlements in the course of doing your research, you said that, they don't really, many of them didn't really identify as climate-induced climate migrants.
Yeah.
So how were they identifying themselves?
They were just migrants who've just come, I'd like to also preface this by how we identify ourselves as Bangladeshis. Like, one of the first common questions that we ask each other is "Apnar bari koi?" Like, where do you live? Because we inherently understand this urban, like rural to urban migration has been a part of the fabric of being Bangladeshi. And so this is not something, you exclusively think about, like, oh, this is the reason I've been migrating. My grandfather helped his children migrate for a better life. So that's how they think. It's a better life. We're hoping for a better solution elsewhere. And so through deeper conversations, do we understand, oh, okay, you lost your home. You lost your livelihood to something else. It was either river erosion or droughts or a very slow onset of climate change, really changing the fabric of, agriculture in that space. And that's where you realize that, yes, climate change is has potentially a role to play. Or, places where you've had multiple cyclones at a increasing number, where by the time a person, finds the time, effort, and money to build their broken home, there's another cyclone. So they've just realized that they just cannot rebuild again. They have to move. And so I think it has been within the purview of researchers, researchers and NGO programs, essentially, to sort of come in and sort of talk about climate change from that perspective. But I think there's also growing awareness of what climate change is, because, again, the settlements aren't going anywhere. So many of us here have gone to the same settlements, probably asked the same household, our different, range of questions. So they're also used to hearing jolobayu, acha, eta, acha, apni eta niye proshno korte aschen na, amra age শুনেছি, হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে, বলেন এখন. But again, there's a growing fatigue of just being studied constantly without, comprehensive solutions being placed. But yeah, that has been my experience.
Really insightful, Tasnia. Thank you for that. I want to move on to Tamazer Appa of ActionAid. Appa, the question that I have in mind for you is, how can we sort of, and I obviously sort of ask you to speak in light of your rich experience of working with ActionAid Bangladesh and before, how can we get a better understanding of the social justice principle, because today is the World Day of Social Justice, in sort of, helping design, effective sort of initiatives and responses for IDPs?
Oh, thank you. Well, from majority of our work that that ActionAid focuses on is when we approach the climate issue, we approach it completely from the social justice angle, because to us it's a growing global, it's a hidden global inequity, because we are constantly trying to make the link between the lady in Shatkhira who had to have a surgery in order to remove her uterus because of climate-induced salinity, constantly causing health issues, leading years of health issues that led up to that decision at the age of 38, while she's still childbearing age. And how do we link that to the issue of climate change at a global level? Because again, she's not responsible, and she belongs to a community and largely actually a country that's not responsible or a major contributor to climate change. So, but she's having to pay the price for the actions of individuals or nations or economic giants, what have you, in the global north. And in order to make that connection, I feel like it needs to be more focus on filling a data gap. I know we talk about, Tasnia Appa pointed out about research fatigue that communities who have been studied, they face, but we have to, there's no alternative to collecting more focused data in order to build that narrative and present that case, not just globally, also at the national level, in order to, frame these arguments, and in order to frame these arguments for also to solicit for resources, because at the same time we have to recognize that climate migrants, this issue is recognized by our national policies. The government has addressed it, but in order to tackle it, we cannot do it alone. And for that, we need not just financial resources, technical capacities, and only the global north, and rightfully so. It is an issue of global inequity, and it has to be approached from that angle. That's our sort of overall argument and overall angle from the way we approach it. And if we have to circumvent the research fatigue that Tasnia Appa mentioned, and bring the insight of these communities and bring into detail, build these stories as cases, at the global level, then we have to, I think, rely a lot on the Gobashana approach, where, we make the communities, design their research and come up with their, build their narratives and issues and data, and we engage them at that level, and that also enriches whatever we have in terms of data. And this data is not just for global argument's sake; it's also for dealing with issues at the national level. We're talking about urban migration, and in order to, I guess, address the increasing influx of climate migrants in the implementation of our policies, we have to, this data will be required in order to kind of guide those policies, guide the implementation of this, of the addressing of these issues, and building the resilience of our urban infrastructure, which is completely inadequate, not only to service the current population that's living in it. And we're not just talking Dhaka. If there are, as Munir Zaman Bhai mentioned, there are 2,000 migrants per day to Dhaka, we're not taking into account the other major cities, especially the ones that are closer to more climate vulnerable areas, like Khulna or Chittagong. Those cities are also receiving an influx of climate migrants every year. So the data gap is something that we would obviously emphasize on.
I think two really interesting things have come up so far, and Tamazarba, you've touched upon one of those things, and I still kind of want to talk more about it. It's the Gono Gobeshona approach. This is a very interesting term that you've used, and I would like pretty much all of you. I mean, Shashwatto, if you want to come in, or Antonia, you can. I mean, this is a question that's open to all. Munir Zaman Bhai, you can come in. Tasnia, you do research. So, but can you guys tell us a bit more about this Gono Gobeshona approach? I mean, it may be the case that your organization uses a different label, and that's fine. But I suppose the whole purpose of this Gono Gobeshona approach is to sort of cut through the research fatigue. Like, you go to a site, you go to a settlement, and you're talking to someone, and they're like, no, হ্যাঁ বুঝছি তো, আপনি এটা নিয়ে জিজ্ঞেস করতে চাচ্ছেন, আচ্ছা বুঝছি. But then sometimes you still might not get a forthcoming answer. It might be a standard answer that they just have ready for us to hear, simply because they just might not be convinced that this research or this project is actually going to lead to something that's going to initiate like a big change in their lives. So could we talk a little bit more about this Gono Gobeshona approach? I mean, we could start off with Munir Zaman Bhai again, and then maybe Shashwatto, Tasnia, Antonia could take it from him.
Thank you, Sanju Bhai. Basically, my experience is from the ground. I started my job with Brack University in 2013 after coming back from USA, and started with climate change-induced migration project. Still, I remember the voice from a old woman. She told me that we can live with any problem, any impact, but we cannot live without drinking water. After Aila in 2009, especially in Shatkhira, the Munshiganj Gabura, this portion of land, it is really difficult for them to survive. And basic need is, that the water, at least they need water. Do you think this water for human being also? The livestock, chicken, everything, they need also water, which is sweet water. And that was a crisis that time. When we know thousands of people migrated from Munshiganj and Gabura, migrated to all the big cities, these people basically climate migrant, because that events scientifically prove that this is a climate change event. Like last, the Sylhet flood also is due to cyclone, that climate change event. Not all the disaster is climate change due to climate change, but some of the disaster changes people's life. Just to show you another story from CNN 2 years back. Still, I remember the CNN story, and I completely agree with Tasni Appa that deeper connectivity. That study, the researcher asked question to the people who lived in Hawaii, that why you lived from Hawaii to US. Most of the participants responded that due to better life. After that, when they said, okay, similar kind of facilities we are providing, especially in Hawaii, are you going to live in this beautiful Hawaii island? 98% said that no, because the hurricane, intensity of hurricane has been changing, and it is not possible to like reconstruct house every year. So this kind of thing, and like when you ask somebody about that, are you climate migrant? Probably they will say no. But if you go deeper, you will find that due to some event, they have to decide to move that particular area. From those situations, what BRAC is basically doing, BRAC, we come up as idea that, okay, from one place to another place, people are migrating. The social justice, for example, that you mentioned, access to resources, equity, participation, diversity, and human rights. Who is taken care of? So in Mongla, we come up an idea which is called migrant-friendly city. Like, what would we look like the migrant-friendly city? What kind of resources they need? For example, when they move to one area, the climatic hotspot, to city, then most of the time they didn't get the access to the school, medical facilities, or other facilities also. Even these people are not that skilled. So they have every right to get that supported. So we are seeing from that local perspective, and what we are doing, we are preparing local adaptation plan for the community, for the ward, and for the town adaptation plan. And the people who lived in that particular community, they will implement those activities. BRAC is helping basically. We implement this similar concept, another 5 cities in Potuakhali and Borgona also. So this is new idea, that Gano Gobeshona approach that mentioned. It means that you need to hear from the local voices. What is their expectation? It's not that it's a top down. You go and give some support, they will accept. No. Last 30 years, we are trying to provide and give water to the different intervention. Still, rainwater harvesting system, which is more than 100 years old practice, they are going with that solution, because that is the only solution, especially in our coastal belt. That is our knowledge from the local level. That's why our Dr. Salimulok sir always mentioned that locally led adaptation. It means some of the climate change related solution has to be driven from the local. Yes, you can incorporate some of the technology, advanced technology, with their local knowledge. So without that, the idea and knowledge from the local level, it is really impossible to develop a structured and effective solution. So that's why that the Gobeshona you mentioned, that why it's a Gobeshona, probably Thomas Zirapa will she will explain more. But my understanding is, yes, we have to hear from everybody's voice. Villagers, teachers, and also the local institution. They know better their local environment. And basically, they also know the solution. What would the solution look like? So we should know. At the same time, my last point is, we always thinking that the people are migrating. Yes, people are migrating for economic purposes. But the climate migrants, they are different. Please, if you go and talk to them, they have some mental issue also, because they are moving from their birthplace to city. They do not have any options. That is the last option. And adaptation has a limit. So we have to see and we have to consider this group of people in a different angle. That is my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Munirzaman Bhai. Antonia, if you could come in at this point. I know that, you have these projects, that you work with informal settlements in urban spaces. And if you could tell us a bit more about that and, draw from the conversations that have taken place so far.
Sure.
That'd be really, really good.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here. Well, first of all, I want to point out a few points that we just discussed, like some of the speakers beforehand. I think it was wonderful how you described that we have to actually hear from the people where they come from and also understand their mindset. Like lately, I had the opportunity to visit an affected area at the Jamuna River where people live in the chars, right? And they have to migrate within the char even. Like they are experiencing the river erosion there. And then within 1 year, I met a woman that had to migrate 3 times. So within 1 year. And till now, we can see in these villages, they find resilience, they find a way to find a new home. But that will not last forever. At some point, they will not find their way in the villages anymore to cope with the climate change effects. And that then pulls the people to the cities. They don't see any other solutions anymore. And although we observe that Dhaka and also Chittagong are getting bigger and bigger when it comes to population increase and immigration, in our work, we are trying to focus on strengthening secondary cities. So we are working in Khulna, Shatkhira, Shirajganj, and Rajshahi. And together with the Ministry of Social Welfare, we are actually trying to increase the capacities of these cities to welcome migrants. So similar to what Sir Monisur Razaman just mentioned, we try to have a migrant-friendly city for them. But how do we get there? We need to know from the people, what do they need? What do they expect? So they come to these cities and they end up living in a slum, right? Like we work with informal settlements there. And these people now need a new job. They need to find a new livelihood. They need to feel home in a way. How can you feel a home when you just arrive in this new environment? It takes time to build your own home, and especially finding a new job. You need to see what are the skills these people bring with them. They come from rural areas, so they have a very different range of experience that is not so applicable maybe for the urban environment. So we try to see a bit what do they bring with them, and try to make it also with the local economy. So what do these cities offer? Where can we get these people involved? And in some slums, for instance, in Shatkhira, we built up some urban gardening within the slum area, so that those people who came from the rural areas can actually use at least their skills that they had beforehand from agriculture. They can implement it there and continue in a way sustaining their food themselves and even maybe sell it afterwards. So these are tiny things that are still possible also in informal settlements, I would say. But then there's still a big gap, right? We need to find more opportunities for these people so that they can sustainably integrate. And what you also have mentioned, Tamazar regarding the collection of more data. I think for us, data is so key. Like if we would have a more understanding within Bangladesh how many people are actually moving and how long are they staying where and what are their needs, I think it's super important. Although I guess it's difficult for those people to talk about that. And it's, as you said, it's also a trauma, right? But I think for policymakers and also especially for NGOs and implementing organizations, these data are key to provide the right action, let's say, afterwards. And if we have more data on that and show also the perspectives of these peoples, of these people that are being displaced, we can speak to a more broader audience and can bring it to the global scale and show these numbers, because in a way, let's say the global north needs to see numbers in a way and understand what's happening in Bangladesh, to understand why we need to work on the climate change issue more and more in the future.
Right. Shashwat, I'm going to put you on the spot now. So I know you have a master's degree in environmental change and management from Oxford, right? So you've studied there and you're back here and you're obviously tied deeply to Uttaran. You know, the stuff that you've learned abroad, arguably at the best school and blah, 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 how does it really relate to what you've seen on the ground in Bangladesh related to the things that we've discussed here today?
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. First of all, amazing speakers and very important points that we are talking about. I have been working with Uttaran for the past 6-7 years, and I'm mostly based in Chatkhira. This is where I live, and this is where I grew up as well. First of all, I want to drag every conversation back to the idea of the social justice issue. Is that I understand there is a global recognition of climate change, and the funding mechanism goes through the idea of climate change. But we also must acknowledge the existing structural marginalization these communities have, which gives birth to all the impacts that we see through climate change. We must acknowledge there are people with intersectional vulnerabilities, and everything must be recognized to address a context-specific solutions. It's a wicked problem. That's what they say in the UK. That requires a wicked solutions. But in terms of, for example, before I go to my learnings abroad and now and the present, for example, I know Moni sir was talking about the drinking water crisis in the southwest coast of Bangladesh, and we have to understand why people live in the west coast at the very beginning. So why are they here? Number one. Number two, it's important that we understand that drinking water crisis does not only stem from climate impacts, it stems from the idea of groundwater salinity increase, which comes not just because there is a weird rainfall, but also because of shrimp culture. To understand why shrimp became a major source of farming in southwest coast of Bangladesh, we must understand the rivers. We must understand the polders that was introduced in the 1960s. We must understand the jamindar system that was prevalent in here. We must understand the peasants who were farmers and who never owned land. And so all these chains connect to the current situation we are in. And we must understand and recognize everything. For example, we have amazing social safety net services in Bangladesh. But for example, if you look that the government says a widow will get a social safety net service in Bangladesh. But if you are married at the age of 16, you have not been registered under the government law because you are illegal at the illegal age to get married, and you are never registered. By 18, you're divorced, your husband dies off, And so again, you're not under social safety net service. If you are a Hindu woman, you don't get any sort of inheritance rights from your family. If you belong from a Hindu Dalit caste, you don't even get to be back at your father's home. The place where your location would be is outside of your father's home, maybe in the shelter of the livestock. That's where a woman who's divorced before the age of 18 or her husband dies is settled. So first of all, it's important that we understand this structural marginalization, and then talk about climate change. So a lot of things we do at the moment in Bangladesh, we look into what we say symptoms, but rather we must look into the root causes or the context-specific problems and look into individual lives in terms of addressing those. Now, coming back to the idea of global north and global south and the education over there and the education over here, yes, there is a genuine gap. Is that in here the way we look into problems might sometimes be shallow, because a lot of our colleagues and a lot of people who invest their time on development work is getting highly disconnected from their roots. So that's why there are a lot of researches that needs to be triggered and questions that some of that sort comes up, and it is important that a lot of connections to the roots must be built. So that's number one. The second thing is that yes, the global north sees data, as Antonio was mentioning, as a big sort of evidence, where I have been constantly denying it, that even if it's just 1%, the global north must invest. But obviously, I feel there is enough of researchers, there is enough of evidences, and I see that there must be rather actions than doing more researches. And I know there is a need for data. I know there is need for the global north with their systemic policies and all. But I think it's high time that they must bend to ensure social justice. Even if it's just 1%, it's an issue of social justice. That's what I want to summarize my point. But in summary, look into structural marginalization, move on to looking into symptoms. We have data in hand, we must act, and people have the knowledge, and we must recognize it. Lastly, if researches are triggered, it should not be top down, it should be bottom up. The Gobishona, citizen science, these other words that we can use for Gobishona, but what I is saying, the communities know what to do, and the communities have the solutions in hand. Give them money and they will show it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shashwat. That was very insightful. I think the discussion is going really well. If you look to the chat window on the right, or if you open up your chat window, you'll see some really interesting questions, and I want to, raise those right now. So Shahryar Bhai and Chandramoni of Caritas Bangladesh, those first two questions I think are quite related. Shahryar Bhai asks, how can we convert climate migrants from being a burden to support for enhancing the resilience of urban settings? And then, of course, Chandramoni of Caritas, the question that this person asked is, I think it was Tasnia who sort of stressed on building resilience, right? Within, the community of climate-induced migrants in urban spaces. But then how is that really possible? So let's start off with these two questions. And the floor is obviously open. It could be anybody. Anybody can really jump in at this point.
I can take the first step, and
Sure.
I'd obviously encourage my fellow panelists to jump in. I think in terms of how climate migrants in the city are considered by some as a burden is, again, a matter of really challenging the dehumanizing narrative that climate migrants are privy to. And again, going back to what Zahid Bhai said, it is about structural migration, marginalization. When you have, systemically discriminated against certain factions of our population, they will continue on that journey of being marginalized, regardless of where they're placed within Bangladesh. If they belong to an urban poor community, and there's a new UNDP study that suggested that 84% of Dhaka's urban poor are climate migrants, which means that there's a cross-section of sort of marginalization that happens there. They're displaced, they've lost their homes, and again, echoing what Monirur Zaman Bhai has said, to lose their homes, they haven't had a breathing space to mourn the lives that they've left, and they have to constantly sort of fight for the new life that they have been given, and which is, negotiating between how difficult it is to, live this new life. And I think it is out not just raising awareness, but a collective effort in humanizing people who are displaced, in humanizing people who are marginalized. And it has to happen across multi-stakeholder groups, starting from, how the national government talks about those displaced, how the local government interacts with those displaced, how people in Dhaka city interact with informal workers who are, coming from these settlements. That humanization has to happen across the board. That would be, an approach I would take for the first question. And for the second, I have always considered the word resilience to be a problematic word. I don't see many people, I see a lot of experts use that word on a bunch of platforms, but I've never looked or understood, the clear definition of it. How do you define resilience? Do you define resilience if, a climate displaced migrant who hasn't had access to fresh water now does, but again, does not have the money to pay for food or books or, education for their children? How do you sort of define the metrics of resilience? Or at what point do you look at a household and say, right, we've done our job, you're now resilient, go on, do your thing. We haven't reached that point yet. And I absolutely agree that, practicality of, accommodating over 4 million people in this city that is already one of the most densely populated cities in the world, it is a difficult ask. But I think, again, dragging on from my first answer, humanization is a big part of it, and recognizing the efforts and the impact climate migrants already have in our economy. The informal economy that runs Dhaka city, essentially a big chunk of that economy is regulated by the urban poor, and a large percentage of whom are climate migrants. The recognition needs to come forth, and I think that is one of the first steps to address some of these issues that were brought up. But obviously, there are more systemic ways of implementing programs to benefit that approach.
I'm going to sort of quickly interject at this point, because I see this really interesting comment left in the chat box by Muhammad Alimuzzaman.
Mm-hmm.
He said that he's currently working in a project aimed at developing a climate-resilient, migrant-friendly town in coastal cities. Muhammad Alimuzzaman, if you're still on the call, do you want to tell us a bit more about it? Like who you are, what is your NGO, and what this project is about?
Thank you. I am currently working and outside right now. That's why it's very much chaos. I think I can answer with chat box.
Yeah, sure. That would be really, really good. It would be really nice to know more about this project that you're talking about. Moving on to another question.
Maybe I can say.
Okay. Right. I want to move on to another question that was left by Sharmin Shilpi. And I thought this was a pretty terse question. was very pointed, but I think it's a very important question that needs to be answered. So Sharmin Shilpi asked, have you actually asked climate-induced migrants if they wish to reintegrate? And if that is the case, what would it take to reintegrate? And if not, what are they expecting from urban cities? Munir Zaman Bhai, do you want to talk about this? So the question was, Sharmin Shilpi asked, have you asked climate-induced migrants if they wish to reintegrate? And if that is the case, if the answer is yes, what would it take to reintegrate? And then, so after Munir Zaman Bhai, Tamazer Appa can come in.
My questions again, reintegrate with what? Sanjeev Bhai.
Ji, sure. Sharmin Shilpi, are you still around? Maybe you could qualify your question a bit more or contextualize it. Yeah.
Probably when she started writing. But again, the question that Tasniapa mentioned about the resilience. Resilience, basically, it's a holistic approach where you have to consider the adaptive capacity, anticipatory capacity, and also absorptive capacity. Altogether, it terms another issue that another capacity comes, which is transformation. All these three together, basically transformation. Like to make and increase adaptive capacity, it's not that your social safety net support will make you like resilient. You need that some kind of that information services also. For example, that is there access to climatic climate warning information available in that community? At the same time, do you have the hospital? Do you have the proper enough cyclone shelter? Like all together, it's a basically holistic umbrella approach. When you have all the facilities are available, it increases your adaptive capacity. But at the same time, adaptive capacity also, it's like how you like increase your skill. For example, just to give you example from Mongla. Like when I meet with Mongla mayor, he said that every week he received a call from the industry that they need 2,000 people every week. And many people from the climatic hotspot, they are moving towards to Mongla rather than Dhaka. You know why? Because if they can go to that Mongla port city, job is available for them. But again, discrimination. It means, are they getting enough salary for their jobs? I think not. Because if we provide the skill, if we increase their capacity, probably they will like get a good salary. And they can also send this money to their village also. So it means that we need a holistic support. Reintegration in two things. One is sometimes that our migration program also have a reintegration thing. Like when they come back to their village, they have enough thing to do. For example, that COVID-19, we have seen the reverse migration also. And many countries have facing different challenges. But in Bangladesh, our local agriculture economy is so vibrant. So when reverse migration happen, at least they can do some jobs in the agricultural field. From BRAC, we did also study, and I visited many places in the rural area during the COVID situation. And we have seen the agricultural sector and other informal sector in the local context are very, very strong. That's why we face all kind of problem during that time. So reintegration if it is in the rural community, they have to have some basic services, which is again come to the social justice. Who will ensure those things? If you ask me, I asked my father that why you moved to Netroguna to Dhaka, and his question was because of frequent flood, and we have lands, but the problem is we cannot grow enough food in the house. So that's why I decided to come to Dhaka. And I asked, are you going back to your birthplace? He said, yes, I'm going, and I'm taking all of my kids to my village because that is our root. So reintegration into their the root place, I think it's possible, but our social safety net program should be very strong.
Thank you, Monir sir. Can I jump in? I am Shamin Shilpi from ActionAid Bangladesh.
Yes,
I think sir already gave answer to my question. Reintegration reintegration is like not only to the ancestral places, but also to any other cities. Again, this is also a question of research that if they want to move into their ancestral places or to other cities that maybe is climate friendly or climate resilient, whatever we say. So this is also a part of a huge research. So you already said that reintegration means like access to basic services, and they livelihood issues, and they can find work, and also they like we so that we can ensure that we are reintegrating them to such a place that they will not be again vulnerable to any kind of climate issues, So that kind of place we really need to like find out, and it is really, really hard in Bangladesh because this is, we know, like for our location, geographical and topographical location, we are really in like a country with lots of disasters. So yeah, that's what I tried to say, and you already gave answer to my question, and I agree with you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shaman Shilpiappa. Tamazer, could you, I can see that you've raised your hand, and after you, Antonia.
Well, Monir Bhai has already addressed some of the things that I was going to say, but I actually wanted to go back to the point of resilience. When we look at resilience, or at least I do, in terms of, in the climate migrants context, I actually would like to focus the attention on the resilience of building the resilience of the urban cities, because whether we like it or not, climate change mitigation was supposed to happen yesterday. It's already set in motion. The reality is that this is going to be a continuous problem. No matter what we do, we are going to get climate migrants at a steady pace. It may increase. Most likely it's going to, the rate of migration will increase to our urban spaces. And that is a reality that we need to plan for. And the complex nexus that is there, that exists between climate-induced migration and economic issues, not just livelihoods, often like health issues that eat away into marginalized populations' livelihoods or their savings, or put them in debt. There are many factors that lead to migration. Loss of land, if we want to, in terms of reintegration, in some cases, families, as I pointed out earlier, there are no options left because for some of them to go back because of the frequent flooding and the land loss. They often lose their land. They're either their homestead or their rural agricultural land. So they have no option to, even if they want to reintegrate. So the focus again comes back to our urban centers. And we know that while we have it on paper and the government recognizes climate migration as an issue, our different sectors and departments have not come up to speed, whether it's our municipalities and the different, our healthcare infrastructure, all the different departments are not up to speed or fully aware that this is the level of pressure they have to deal with. from now on. And this should have been done, actually. The planning should have started again earlier. But now going forward, it is urgent that there is greater awareness among and coordination among the different bodies that deal with urban planning and urban infrastructure, whether it's education or health or municipalities, because all of these factors are under pressure. We're talking about, overstretched health, transport, water and sanitation, garbage, everything. Livelihoods is a completely different, separate issue altogether. While they are getting integrated into informal economies, again, it's still it's going to overwhelm that capacity as well at the rate that we are going forward. So there needs to be greater conversation, greater institutionalization of this issue, and the greater coordination, and greater understanding among all this as we move forward. If we want to address this is something that we cannot ignore. While we talk about the other aspects of it, from a climate justice angle as well, this is just a reality that we have to plan for now.
Antonia, did you want to?
Yes, sorry, I was having some trouble. Actually, what I want to say goes really in line with what Tamazar was just raising. I think what we also need to think about is that these people who come to the urban areas, to the bigger cities, they have no real recognition as climate migrants. Like, okay, we frame them in that way, and we say these are people who have been displaced due to climate change, but who has a mandate for them? Who's taking care of them, actually? There's no real legal term for them that's giving them any such rights, let's say. And when they come to these cities, it takes time till they are actually being registered there. So they arrive there, but they are in need for social services. They need first, like, some kind of support to really arrive in these cities and to strengthen their integration. There needs to be a link with the local municipalities, but also with the departments that are in these cities to cater for them in a way. And there is still a big lack, I think, where we need to fill a gap so that they can actually access the service that they are entitled to. So they are still registered in the rural areas they come from, and it takes a while till they are really, like, let's say, based in these cities. And we should also not forget that especially women and persons with disabilities among these climate-induced migrants, they are extra vulnerable, and they need this care, and they need a fast access to social services, so that, yeah, they get the support they are needed. So I think that's maybe something that's also important to think about when dealing with that.
Right. We're kind of nearing the end of today's webinar, but and there were several other questions that we did want to talk about, but I think the last set of questions that we will talk about relate to education. Shahrib had left a question in the chat box. He asked, have you asked, the question that Shahrib Bhai asked relates to, whether if there are any specific education programs for climate-induced migrants in urban spaces, and what is the sort of proportion or portion of investment that goes in to such educational sort of initiatives. And then, of course, if you could touch upon the extent to which, public-private actors can sort of ensure, equal access to education opportunities for climate-displaced individuals, and how that could potentially contribute to social justice. So it's on this theme that we want to talk a little bit more, and then we can wrap up for today.
Can I start with Sandeep Bhai?
Absolutely, Munazan. Thank you.
Okay. Before joining this webinar, I tried to search the climate migrant and the displaced, internal displaced people in our famous National Adaptation Plan and also 8th Five-Year Plan. In the 8th Five-Year Plan, I found climate migrant words one time and also the internal displaced people one time. But in the National Adaptation Plan, the climate migrant shabdo, that word is not there. It means still there is a huge gap in the policy level. Understanding this group of people. Yes, I fully agree with that we need proper legal definition. At the same time, when we do the census, we have to have a proper place where people is going to mention this situation. In that case, we can identify the people and also we can locate that which portion of the country that basically people are migrating. Though it's not in the national policy arena, how do we expect that in the education system it will incorporate? Even in the COP, this time I also, Tasniapa, I also attended the COP. But this climate change migration, climate-induced migration, it's not that kind of get attention in the global level because our situation, we are in the global south, our pain is ours. We feel proud sometimes we are the 7th most vulnerable country in the world. We really like to mention this word. And people sometimes they also happy that, yeah, Bangladesh is the 7th most climate vulnerable country. But it's not a happy word because we lived in a city, but the people who are most sufferer, they lived in a place where every day their life, they are facing a challenge. Yes, some of the issues are anthropogenic, I fully agree, but at the same time, there are scientific evidence that climate change is something that we have to take care of. Now we already crossed 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature last year. I don't know, maybe in next 2 or 3 years or 5 years, that 2 degree we can cross. That is not good for us. That is not good for the people, marginalize the people, because they are the most vulnerable people and vulnerable segment. And women and children, we have to also taking care of. So yes, that ICAT, they started that climate change, the masters in climate change science. I think our national, that public university also should started this kind of master's initiative, master's program, so that more people can learn. So, and finally, my last question, we need scientific evidence. Without scientific evidence, we cannot say in the global platform. We cannot mention any knowledge in the global platform. So I think the BRAC University, I know Tasniapa, they are doing a great research, but we need, you guys have to publish in the global top journal so that it can mention globally that something happened in Bangladesh, we have to take care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Monir Zaman Bhai, and thank you. This is something that I would really appreciate, because as director research at CPJ, I'm really trying to sort of inspire our researchers to get published in peer-reviewed, in the best possible sort of academic journals. I think unless anybody else wants to add anything. Oh, Tamazerapa, yes, of course. I'm sorry, I didn't notice that you had raised your hand. Please,
No, it's okay. I just wanted just 30 seconds of just to mention something that came up in one of our surveys. And through our programmatic implementation, we often do surveys and researches, and a lot of them are just validating, the things that we all know about in this forum. Loss of livelihoods, education, those, and in line with what Munir has said, that climate change is a reality that we cannot ignore, and it trumps over anthropogenic activities that's causing the vulnerabilities that induce migration. Because in one of the surveys that we were doing with our child sponsorship program, children who have been, we have children from the age of 13 to 18 who have been made aware of climate change and its issues. And then at the end of the program, we did a survey last year. It was a very detailed survey. And as I was trying to extrapolate data from the survey and understand the outcomes, it didn't stop me on my tracks that a lot of them, there was like overwhelming data saying that some of them didn't get to go to school due to floods for as long as 2 months in a year. That didn't stop me in its track, or that their families were suffering due to, serious financial issues, they're vulnerable. Those didn't, because those we are kind of sensitized to. What stopped me in my track was there were multiple respondents, young children, who had said that they have only read about Bangladesh having the 6 seasons. They've never seen that. They've never experienced that in their lifetime. And that stopped me in my track, because I did. Growing up, I knew the changing of seasons. And I've lived all over Bangladesh because my dad was in the defense forces. So I've seen, and even in Dhaka, I felt changing of seasons as late as my, prior to leaving for college to the States. And that really, really shook me. That living in, like, say, the coastal belts of Bangladesh, they said they only experience 2 seasons. Prolonged extreme summer with intense short monsoon and a very intense cold winter, which is very short-lived. And that's the only season that they've experienced. And so the impact of climate change, I think sometimes we get lost in the data and we don't internalize how far-reaching it is, and to what extent, what threshold we're sitting on as a country. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamazagor. Before we move on to Tasnia, I just wanted to add something. So Tasnia, myself and some other researchers at the CPJ, we went to Satkhira and Joshua recently. And I just wanted to add something to what Tamazagor was saying, because I thought it was really, really insightful. This farmer was telling us that he said, Janen, খেজুরের রসটা না আগের মতো আর মিষ্টি না. Isn't it? I mean, this is precisely what you were saying, that, Age we experienced 6 seasons. Now we kind of have 2. And Age, it was sweeter, but it's not really as sweet anymore. I mean, and when that person said that, I was like, that is so true. And that is, anyways, Tasnia. And after Tasnia, we're going to wrap up for today.
Thank you. I'm going to keep it very short. I just wanted to add a few points to the question that was asked in particular about education. I think we have had brilliant NGOs and INGOs sort of create these safe spaces in schools in the settlements. BRAC is, one of those leading organizations. For my research, I've had conversations with the 2nd-generation climate migrant who moved with her family, studied at BRAC schools, and now is a teacher at a BRAC school. That journey is incredible. And then, again, going back to what Zahid Bhai said, we have to keep structural marginalization in mind, because her next step was seeking tertiary education, and she hasn't been able to because her child is sick. And that one family member being sick in a household really changes the direction of a family's future and their family's plight. And so, again, we see this constant levels of negotiations between people who have, become aware at the receiving end of support, and then, are still grappling with the realities of climate change and a lack of resources in Dhaka settlement. In terms of education, we also see a lot of dropouts after primary education is over, particularly in secondary, during secondary education. We also see, and I've heard respondents tell me how difficult it is to afford the extra education, or not being able to afford the school that her children was, qualified to get into. But it's just, again, with the price hikes, it's very difficult to maintain that stream of education. So absolutely, there's space where NGOs and educational institutions like Brack University to come in and sort of address this problem of being dropouts. And I think this is a space that CPJ has some vested interest in. The mayor himself last year, before going to COP, promised 1 crore in aid to improve the education in Dhaka settlements. But again, as this conversation has highlighted, Dhaka is not the only, place receiving migrants. There needs to be a holistic and more comprehensive approach to this entire issue. I think on that note, I'd like to conclude and again thank all the panelists. I've learned so much and have from everyone's perspective, and I hope this conversation continues. Back to you, Sanjay.
Right. We were supposed to finish at 12:15. It's 12:19, so we're going to wrap up for today. This has been really, really insightful, and I'm really we CPJ, we're really grateful to all the panelists: Monir Zaman Bhai, Tamazarapa, Antonia, Shashwat, and Tasneem. Thank you very, very much for such an insightful discussion. I want to sort of finish off with two sort of small announcements from our end. Tasnia has a photo exhibition which starts on the 3rd of March at the EMK Center. It's something that's being organized by the Climate Action Champions Network. And in that photo exhibition, Tasnia is going to tell us stories about climate-induced migrants. I mean, 15 stories. It's going to be really cool. So we really, really want you to come. And then, of course, on the 4th of March at the same venue at the EMK Center, CPJ, on the occasion of Women's Day, we're having this event where we're going to talk about the stories of women at the forefront of climate change in urban spaces. And it would be really, really nice if you all could come. And I noticed today that there were a lot of participants in today's webinar who threw out insightful questions our way, and very grateful for that. So thank you all. See you again soon. Bye-bye.
Antonia,
thanks a lot, everyone. Yes,
I'll share
share
the
it?
formal invitation with all of you. Yeah,
That would be amazing. Cool.
Great.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice day.